Okay, so today I'm going to show you some basics about Tinkercad. In doing so, we're going to be making a portion of a project that we make in our 7th grade classes. It's a basketball game here at Admiral Byrd Middle School in Winchester. So first of all, if you have not, please go into tinkercad.com. Once you've got into there, so if you have a Google account or a Microsoft account, you can go straight to sign in. There's other options here, but otherwise I'd probably just go to sign up. If the students have one of those two type accounts for your school, it's really nice because then it just makes life easier for everybody. So I went to sign in. My school district uses Google, so I'm going to go to sign in using social providers. And here you can also use Facebook or Yahoo, but I'm going to go right in with Google. So for all of you that are first timers with Tinkercad here, when you first go in, it's going to probably, because it doesn't always happen this way, but it's probably going to show up with something that looks like this. It's probably not going to be shooting sparkles and stuff out of it yet, but this is one of the tutorials, learning the moves. They do have these built in, but we're just going to use our own here. So to get out of this, up in the top, click on the Tinkercad logo, and that will take you to your dashboard here with, as you create things. You can see I have all sorts of things. I have multiple pages of things here, but today we're going to just go into create a new design. So real quick, I'd just like to show you some basic things here on the screen. It always gives you some kind of crazy, absolute bonkers type of file name here. Just click on that and you can change the file name. Let's call this, I'm going to call it VTEEA tutorial. There we go. Also, we have, basic buttons up here at the top: copy and paste, duplicate, delete, undo, redo, grouping, ungrouping, aligning, flipping. There are some options that we can take a look at here later, but you can change. If you have kids that are into Minecraft, they can create things in Tinkercad and export them into their games here using this little blocks command. Legos, this is a new thing in here that if you design something, you can actually change it over so it shows in Lego bricks, and then you can go layer by layer and actually create that design out of Legos, which is interesting. And some other options up here. See, shape generators, what's new. So like always, if you just hover over things, it'll tell you what those things do, with apparently the exception of this. This is a collaboration button, which we'll be getting to. Importing, exporting, sharing, a bunch of other things here. So at the moment, what we want to do is, I'd like to show you a couple things about the actual workspace. If you have a mouse, it's really nice. If you hold down the right mouse button and drag, you can rotate your work plane, your viewing area here. If you have a wheel, you can hold down the wheel and that will allow you to pan. If you scroll the wheel in and out, that'll zoom in and zoom out. If you don't have a mouse, it's not that big a deal. It's nice, but it's not that big a deal. We have the cube up here with all the different views, so I can click and hold on that and drag around to see different parts of the same thing as when I was using the right mouse button here. I can actually click on a view and see just that view. You can tell from here we're in perspective view. So the buttons off to the left here, I can switch to orthographic. Please do that. Switch over to orthographic. When I do, if I'm on a view, I should just see a straight line here since we're in perfect 2D looking straight on to the side. Zoom out, zoom in, zoom to fit, and the home view button, which I would go ahead and hit the home view button right now as well. The default here is metric. I don't want metric for what we're going to do today. So lower right hand corner, we're going to go to edit grid and change this over to inches. Make sure you click update grid. Snap grid will be showing you here shortly, but basically what the snap grid does is, just to show you quickly, say I bring out a shape, I grab a corner, and my snap grid is set to 1/2 inch. So every time I move here, if you watch my numbers, it's moving by 1/2 inch. So 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. So that's what that's all about. You can just grab and drag things, or you can type in numbers here. Either way, it works just fine. On that note, go ahead and bring out a box, and don't worry about the snap grid just yet. It's going to default to 1/8 inch. I'm going to leave it at 1/8 inch. That'll be just fine. The ruler, upper right hand corner here, we've got the ruler. Please click on it. You don't even have to hold. You can just click once, let go, and come out and drop one in somewhere on the work plane. What's nice about that is that will keep the dimensions of our block up at all times. This one, it's set to 0. That's the height off of the work plane. So if I change it, let's do 1 inch. You can see what happens there. Also, if I don't want to use that, there's keyboard shortcuts as well. And in our session, we're going to give you a paper copy of those. They're available under the Learn tab on Tinkercad as well. On the box, there's a little cone right here, black cone. That is what controls the height off of the work plane. The white and little black squares are the nodes that control the actual sizes of the part. And down here as well, one other thing highlighted in green, that's the distance from the, in this case, the corner, bottom left corner of the cube to the origin of my ruler here. So later this will be easier. I'm going to set this to 0, 0. There we go. All right, so we're making a backboard and a hoop for a project that, like I said, we do here at Emerald Bird. It's just a good little intro into this program. So the first thing we need to do is set in our dimensions for, let's do the backboard here first. The length. So up front here, and depending on how you have everything oriented, that could change, what's what, or things might show up slightly different. So just be aware. I like to move a little bit so I can see for sure what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the front here, so this will be our length. We're going to set our length to 5.75. While this is Autodesk, this program is not capable of, it will not accept if you try to type in 5 3/4. So you have to put in decimal, just so that's cleared up there. Depth is going to be 3/4, 0.75. And the height over here is going to be 4 inches. And I'm just typing that in, hit enter, and it locks it into place there. That's our backboard. Here we have a little window with all sorts of things in it. I would not recommend using the length, width, and height to try and size these. It's relatively new to the program and doesn't seem to work that wonderfully, so I would just leave it be. The cancel button here is, for some reason, Microsoft's going crazy on me, so that's you can ignore. If you can even see that cancel button, it might not show up the way I have the recording set up here, but if you can see it, that's nothing. Ignore it, please. I do like to change color just because it makes me happy to something that looks more like wood, because we make these out of wood. Notice we're on solid here. I can turn things into a hole. We'll be getting that here shortly, but I want this to be a solid. So there is our backboard. Now we're going to create a hoop. So for the hoop, I'm just going to take this and slide it out of the way for now. A little extra space. I'm going to leave the ruler up, and I'm going to bring out another box. Again, highlighted in green, we can ignore those two. We've got our depth, our length, and our height. Let's start with the height. Height's going to be 1/2 of an inch. And of course, if you ever get one of these mixed up, you can always go up and undo, or Control Z to undo whatever you messed up. 1/2 inch tall. The hoop is going to be 2.5 inches long, 2.5. And while it is going to be, technically it's a square in overall dimensions, but we're not going to put those in. We're going to do half of the 2.5 at 1.25. Show you why here in just a moment. So there we go. Your box should be set up to 2.5 long, 1/2 inch tall, and 1 1/4 deep. Again, making sure that I'm on orthographic, which if it says switch to perspective, that means we're on the only other option, which is orthographic. I'm going to click on the top here. That way I can see exactly what I'm doing. Whenever this is selected, if you don't want that selected, the easiest way is to click and hold somewhere in no man's land and just drag a little box and let go, and it goes away. We need a solid cylinder. So up here is the hole. This one's a solid. I'm going to drag out a solid cylinder. One thing right away I'd like to show you, sides. If I zoom in here, this is not actually round, and we can decrease that even more. If anytime you're making a cylinder or circle, I'd take that sides and just crank it the whole way up. That way, it's still technically not a circle, but it's going to give you enough sides that it's going to look nice and smooth and clean. So 64 sides here. Our dimensions for this. So because this is part of the hoop, I'm going to keep the same height at 1/2 of an inch, 0.5. I want this to be the whole length of this part. So I'm going to set this to 2.5. And I want the depth to be 2.5 as well. Here we go. Okay, so I can drag this around and hope that I get it right on. Sometimes it works out well. Other times it's just due to the nature of how they have dimensions set up on this program. It doesn't always work out so nicely. So one thing I'd like to show you real quick here is I'm going to select both of these parts. I can either just drag a box, just left click and drag over both, or if I select one, hold down shift, select the other, I can select more than one part at a time. Up top we have an align tool, or you can hit the L button. We get all these little boxes. This is a way to just that, align things. So if I hit the center dot here, that's going to align me to make sure that it's centered across the length here. And then, if you mouse over, you can see exactly where things fall. But I want the back button here to send that. So it's now aligned, centered this way, and the center of the circle is right along the edge of the rectangle we made. At this point, let's go ahead and up top here again, we have a group button, or Control G. Go ahead and group those two together. Now we have the basic shape of the hoop here, as you can see. We just need to put in the hole to actually cut the hole into that hoop. For this, we're going to use the gray, multicolored gray cylinder. Just drag it out, drop it. If you get a little twisted here, you can just click on top again. Here we go. Again, sides, crank and clear up. If you accidentally bring out a solid, just click on hole. So make it easy there. The diameter of the hole that we drill into this project is 1 1/4. Again, we don't have diameter, so what we need to do here is just make sure that the depth and the length are both the same. So 1.25 on the depth, 1.25 on the length, and now I have a true hole that's just not centered in our block. So once again, I'm going to hold down, I already have the hole selected. I'm going to hold shift and click on the hoop, and I'm going to use the align tool again or hit the L button. Here you can see that once you group things, if you need to ungroup them for some reason, there is an ungroup button, or Control Shift G will also do the same thing. Also a flip button, if sometimes that can be handy. We don't need that right now, but so line icon, I want this centered, so I'm going to do center on both sides. There we go. So to cut a hole, so we have the hole and we have the solid, but we don't actually have a true hole cut through here. With both of these selected, when we group them, then it will actually go ahead and cut that hole in there. So anytime you're cutting a hole anywhere in anything, you need to group the solid, group the hole, and then select the solid, select the hole, and group them, and that will cut that section away. Okay. So the last thing that we need to do here, and let's see, is just take, so I'm looking at the hole here and kind of glad that that happened. That's actually not the right size. What I was thinking of is our dimensions over to the center of the hole, because I'm always looking at that, explaining to class how to make this project out of wood, and then we drill it. So let's go back and adjust that. So this was 2.5. We end up leaving a 1/2 inch perimeter or less. Maybe more along the lines of a 3/8. So I'm glad this happened. Let's go ahead and ungroup that. It goes in order that you group things. So if this is the last part I ungrouped, I can just adjust it here real quick. Let's try 1.75 and 1.75. And once again, I'm going to align, center, center. That looks better. We could do 1.5, we could do 1.75, something like that, but that'll work just fine. So I'm going to group those again, and there, that looks a little better, a little more likely to actually get a basketball through that hoop. So there's a couple ways of attaching parts together. We can use that align tool. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work so well. Here's another way that I've found that can be quite useful for attaching things. So I'm going to take a work plane. We've got the blue work plane here. I can attach work plane to other places. So I'm going to take this work plane, put it on the front side of the backboard. And now we can see what that's done. So a tool that I just learned this past year and wish I would have known about for years now. I'm going to select the hoop and I'm going to hit the D, letter D as in dog, on the keyboard. That will drop this part down to the work plane. Because I put the work plane on the front side here of the backboard, it's going to drop this directly up against my backboard for me. That doesn't help with any measurements side to side or anything like that, but that's just kind of throwing that out there as a tool that can be helpful. Once you do that, if you want to go back to your initial work plane, just take the work plane, drop it somewhere out in no man's land, and it'll revert back to the normal version here. So one more thing worth showing you, we're going to go the easy route and use a line tool to center this across the length of the backboard. But with the ruler, it defaults to going to a corner of a part. Here's the X dismiss the ruler. Here, if you mouse over, we can see there's a circle with 3 lines in it. Use midpoint. If I click on that, Now it's going to give me the distance from this point to the center of my part. So, if you place this carefully, you can use that to, we could potentially use that to center this up or set it to a specific point. That can be really helpful, being able to toggle between endpoints and midpoints. In this case, that's not what I'm going to bother doing. Let's select both parts. You can also do Control A. We'll do a line, and the only thing we need to do right now is just center that across the length. So when I come out here, that'll center across the length. It's already flat against the bottom because of the work plane here. It's already attached flat here because of the work plane we used there. So the only thing I need is the center. I can hit escape to get rid of that tool. And it looks a little funny with brown and red at the moment, but if you just click and drag over everything or Control A, let's group these two parts together, and there is the main part of the backboard. Alright, so there's one more thing that I'd like to show you here today. There's a hole where we put the pole down into our part. To show you that quickly here, let me show you the rotate tool. I could do this 15 different ways, but so you can see more tools. You can use these little arrows to adjust your angles in X, Y, or Z axis, along the X, Y, or Z axis. In this case, I want to rotate this thing 180 degrees. So doing this, if I stay inside the circle here, it goes in 22.5 degree increments. If I go outside of the circle, you can see it lights up red out here. I can go in single degrees, or if I hold down the shift key, it now goes in 45 degree increments. So a number of ways to accomplish this. I want to make sure in the end I'm set to 180. So I'm set to 180 here. So we had these all grouped together. Maybe I don't want it grouped together. It might be easier to see, the actual part here. One thing I could do, especially if we use the align tool, we can ungroup that temporarily. So now I have just the backboard by itself again. Let's grab a work plane, drop one on top of, well, technically the bottom, but on top of the backboard here. I need a cylindrical hole. Drop it here in the center. Again, the sides, crank it on up as high as it goes. And I could bring a ruler out, but I can just click on the corner here. We're going to do 3/8 or 0.375. Length 0.375. And my height. To get my height, again, the cone is the distance off of the ground here, off of the work plane. The white box, which highlights red when I'm over it, is my height. We're going to do 1/2 inch, so 0.5, enter. So if I rotate around, you can see that's the diameter and depth of the hole that I have students drill in this part. With that hole selected, I'm going to hold down Shift and select just the backboard, not the hoop. Use the align tool. If we had everything grouped, it wouldn't work out as well, so ungroup those first. Here we go. Now I centered it across the depth here. I centered it across the length. Now the only thing I need to do is drop it down in. Two easy ways we could do this. One, we could set the snap grid. Select this. Oh, I gotta hit escape to get rid of the line tool. I could use the little black cone and drop this 1/2 inch down in, which would set it flush. Or if I hit the drop key, it's going to move the wrong thing. I don't want to do that. The way my work plane's set, I will not want that. So in this case, our best case scenario, best bet for this is going to be to use the snap grid, set it to 1/2 inch. And we want to make sure that we grab the little cone here. If I angle that better, you can see. And one drop down in will give me that 1/2 inch depth there. There you go. So again, we still don't have an actual hole. What I'll do here, I'm just going to drop work plane back in no man's land. I'm going to select everything by just doing Control A and group it all together. So now we have our 1/2 inch hole down in here. We have the hoop on the front, and we have our backboard. The only thing left to do is flip this back over. So again, I'm gonna grab that, hold shift down, and spin it 180 degrees, and there you have it. Real fast before I get off of here, all sorts of different shapes. The scribble is brand new to 2018. Actually, probably somewhere around May of 2018, I think that came out. There's more than just basic shapes. There's text and numbers, characters, all sorts of different things in here. Shape generators can be pretty helpful. So, please experiment and check out all the different things. At my school, we went in and used the states and made Christmas presents for the entire staff, and just went down and used Virginia, and ended up doing a laser engraving project that way. But just so you know, there's a bunch of other things other than just the basic shapes here. Definitely worth some time to experiment with. You can import things, different files into here, STLs, object files, and SVG files. One thing that's cool is you can take an SVG and turn it into a 3D object, or you can take a STL or object file and turn it into a SVG two-dimensional file. So sometimes that can be pretty handy if you don't have other software available to do it. We've used that in place of other programs at times. Export for 3D printing. You got your files here for laser cutting. Obviously, this would do us no good to laser cut, but not the way we drew it, at least. So if we wanted to 3D print, we could export those, download, or you can go straight to some of the different 3D printers that are Wi-Fi or can be networked. Share, same thing, you share it out with people. Or what I do in class for students to turn things in is I like to have them use this collaborate button, a little outline of a person with the plus. I have them generate a link, copy it, turn this in on Classroom. What that does is, instead of just getting the STL file, this gives me access to exactly what we see here for the students. So I can come in and check real quick and see what their dimensions are, make sure they did things right before we take something and actually 3D print it and find out that way that it's wrong. So it can be really handy. But and again, we can turn this into Lego bricks, which is kind of funny. You can go down layer by layer and see what everything is, making things and importing them into different video games, and then of course our regular designs here. But anyway, hopefully this was helpful to you, and enjoy tinkering.